This is a new 3D version of Nintendo's Donkey Kong.
Read your case file, grab your gun and clever gadgets, then control the actions of
New friends and adventure. It's Banjo-Kazooie for your Nintendo 64.
Game developers Rare were booming in the late 90s from various critically acclaimed releases on the Nintendo hardware. The likes of Donkey Kong Country, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, and what many consider to be their magnum opus, Banjo-Kazooie, were all released in a 6-year span of each other, further cementing Rare as one of the best game developers of the time. As the N64 came to its end, Rare wanted to send the console out with one last swan song, a title so innovative and unseen in the industry that people would be wowed at just the description of the game. That was Rare's ambition for this title, but they didn't get the reception they had hoped for. After lukewarm at best reception from conventions such as E3 '99 and 2000, Rare was skeptical this title would even work, despite the fact they had already finished a half of the game. In their lowest moment, when all hope seemed lost, none other than gaming legend and creator of the Mario and Zelda series, Shigeru Miyamoto, came to ask a request from Rare. He saw their work with this game and saw striking resemblances to the already established Nintendo franchise, asking them to scrap it and to turn the remnants into a title for Nintendo's newest console, the GameCube. Rare agreed and ended up creating a game in the top 15 highest selling GameCube games of all time. What was this game, and what Nintendo classic did it become? If you want to find out, then join me as I tell the story of the unreleased Nintendo game you've probably played. It all starts in 1994 when Nintendo bought parts of developers Rare after they demonstrated a boxing game demo using SGI systems which created 3D graphics. As the SNES couldn't display 3D graphics, Rare used the SGI systems to create these graphics which they then pre-rendered onto the SNES cartridge, creating an artificial sort of 3D look in a process known as advanced computer modelling. Their demonstration was so impressive that Nintendo bought a 25% share in Rare, which over time increased to a 49% and made them a second-party developer. Due to their impressive pitch, Nintendo offered them the role to create a 3D CGI game, which eventually became Donkey Kong Country. Following on with titles such as GoldenEye 007 and Banjo-Kazooie, which were generation-defining games, Rare decided to challenge themselves to create a title so ambitious that people would line up in the streets to play it and be inspired for years to come by the gameplay. The game promised Zelda-style dungeons combined with an open-world exploration system that rivaled the most modern releases. This game they wanted to create went by the name of Dinosaur Planet and saw the player explore open-world environments while saving the planet filled with dinosaurs from destruction. Rare truly wanted to challenge the N64's hardware as well as themselves, and with their track record of games, who would doubt them? This game would continue to appear in all forms of media, such as gaming magazines containing screenshots and news of the game, advertising it for a 2000 release. Everything came to a climax as E3 2000 approached. Rare had about halfway developed the game and were ready to showcase parts of it, which went something like this. The reception was not what Rare had hoped for, being lukewarm at best. Of course Rare were going to continue with the project, but confidence and motivation had been lost, and it would have stayed that way if it wasn't for one key figure. It's important to remember that Rare were partly owned by Nintendo, meaning Nintendo legend Shigeru Miyamoto came to Rare, intrigued by the title they were developing, and explained the similarities he saw between the characters of it and one of Nintendo's other franchises. It told the story of Saber, son of Wizard Randorn, and Crystal, who was Randorn's adopted daughter. They each would have been playable, with respective sidekicks Tricky and Kite accompanying the protagonists on their quest. Gameplay would have allowed the players to alternate between these two characters through the use of a swap stone, with each serving their use at different points and locations of the game. The main premise of the game involved visiting various planets in the system and saving the main dinosaur planet threatened by general scales. This would have been achieved through Zelda-esque dungeons filled with puzzles and bosses to progress the story. Some of you may already recognise what this game became, but for those of you that haven't, Dinosaur Planet eventually turned into the title, Star Fox Adventures. Selling over 1.82 million copies, it's clear that Star Fox Adventures was a success and played by quite literally millions of people. It may have been a blessing for Rare that this change happened, as Star Fox Adventures and the concept they were pushing for Dinosaur Planet seemed to be too complex for the N64, with Star Fox Adventures itself being one of the GameCube's most demanding titles. Am I taking it too far in saying that you've practically played Dinosaur Planet if you've played Star Fox Adventures? I don't think so, but to be certain, let's compare the games side by side to see how similar they truly are. Starting with the story, cutscenes from both titles show that the story is almost identical between games, with shot-for-shot cutscenes sometimes appearing. If these cutscenes aren't enough to convince you, let's have a look at the characters. Crystal in Star Fox Adventures is a direct replica of her character in Dinosaur Planet, staff and all. Saber was replaced by series protagonist Fox McCloud, but still has Tricky as a sidekick. General Scales is still one of the main villains of the game, and the iconic shopkeeper
You pay this much.
appears in both titles. Just to further emphasise this point, let's look at locations side by side. It's clear from these locations and story that Star Fox Adventures takes place in this same world sculpted for Dinosaur Planet, but what about the gameplay? Both games would have played almost identical, being based around an action-adventure RPG format. Both titles wanted to implement a Zelda-style system of dungeons to progress the story, which would involve boss fights, puzzles and items. The locations in both titles are clearly meant to be the same locations from Dinosaur Planet, and when you see cutscenes that are shot-for-shot identical, Star Fox Adventures is Dinosaur Planet, or at least the final product it would become. With both games being in the same world, with the same story, and more or less the same characters, it's now safe for me to say that Dinosaur Planet is the unreleased Nintendo game that you've probably played. But that isn't the end of the story. Quite literally, one day after Star Fox Adventures released, Rare were acquired by Microsoft, meaning they made games for the Xbox now rather than Nintendo's consoles. This meant we would never get to see a sequel to Star Fox Adventures by Rare, or Dinosaur Planet never released. Or did it? In 2021, a team of people compiled all the known assets for the game, and after making huge discoveries, released a playable build of Dinosaur Planet, which has about a full hour worth of gameplay that was finished. This discovery gives us an insight into how far along Rare were when they decided to make the change to Dinosaur Planet, and subtle differences between the titles. All the gameplay you've seen of Dinosaur Planet throughout this video is from this recent release, which you can play yourself. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe to see even more stories and reviews I upload. If you have any suggestions for videos or content, let me know in the comments below. But for now, goodbye.